You will very much know what they know if you provide a problem that requires that background knowledge, that you can't really solve without that background knowledge, or you can't solve it at a higher level. And again, one of the examples that I often use is how I came to the United States. You know, I had to show that my English was good enough. And there were two different ways to assess that. There's a formal process that's similar to our multiple choice tests. It's called the test of English as a foreign language, the TOEFL test. In order to attend James Madison University, I had to show my English was good enough. And the way they assessed it is I read a passage and then they asked me some multiple choice questions. And I was stunned because how I grew up, I'd never had a multiple choice test in my life. And so I was stunned that the right answer was already there. And it seemed so simple. It was just, okay, yes, you can pick up the clues in the passage or what you listen to, and you could answer the question. They could be difficult too. But then the second part had to do with me moving to the United States, and I had to get my green card because I wasn't just coming for a university, I came to live here. And so when I went to the embassy in Vienna, the staff there, they needed to know whether my English was good enough because it's also one of the requirements. And the way they tested this was they had a conversation with me, and they could have that conversation at a very difficult level. And they wanted to know my cultural understanding. And it would have been incredibly difficult for them to measure that in a multiple choice test. So they started with, have you ever heard of Michael Jordan? And the direction you can take that, whether you understand sports or whether you understand cultural issues in the United States, whether you understand the value of Air Jordans and the issues that can come along with that. And we had all these amazing conversations. And I will challenge anyone to tell me that that wasn't a better way to know how I would function in the United States compared to a multiple choice test on the TOEFL test.
People in real life, your boss is not going to come up to you, give you a worksheet that has A, B, C, and D. He's going to expect you to think for yourself.
It's not just reading questions off the screen. It's actually learning about the stuff and then putting it into like a paragraph.
When you do them, you feel more involved with them instead of SOLs, where it's just purely by the book. You learn more about them, you research about them, and then you write overall what you learned and how you can use it in real life. They just feel more involved than normal SOLs and tests.
Helps challenge your brain more, helps engage it more, and helps apply problems to real-world situations. And whereas SOL testing, A, B, C, or D, you pick one. That's the easiest thing. Just press a button, A, B, C, or D.
Project assessments are a greater representation of what students can do with the knowledge that they're gaining, the content that they're gaining within especially social studies classrooms. I think that especially in today's society, we need students to be able to apply the knowledge that they've learned in social studies, especially in civics and economics, because students, although they may know that there are three branches of government and they may know that they have freedom of speech, applying it to their own lives or applying it in specific situations, I think is of greater importance than just being able to say, I know that the legislative branch is Congress, or I know that the president is the executive branch.
When you do these in civics, you can understand more of the branches of government and how they work together and how they work in general. Because with just facts and questions, it's you memorize them then, and then you completely forget about them because you know you won't really use them again. But when you research it, you remember it because you spent time and you invested time to look for the information.
Having given both a standardized test and performance assessments, I find that I have preferred giving performance assessments because the rigor is actually higher, but the stress level is lower. So I find that I'm able to better address individual specific student needs and help them be successful.
Performance-based assessments lend themselves extremely well to rigorous assessment. They have to be well designed. Right? Just like any assessment, but they bring in that application level. We focus so much on just recall and on remembering things. And remembering something is really important, but it's really important when it then gets used. And if we don't teach students how to use the knowledge and how to bring knowledge from, let's say, nutrition science into medical science, or from social studies into science. You're talking about medical ethics. You're talking about the ethics of genetic modifications. Then you won't be. That's so difficult to test in multiple choice tests. But in performance-based assessments, you can test that, and it allows students really to show how they combine knowledge and create new knowledge.
Very seldom, are we just, unless we're playing Jeopardy or Trivial Pursuit with friends, do we just have to recall rote information, but we have to be able to tie it to something and make connections. So I think that's where the performance assessment does. It's just more robust in what it asks of our students, and also our teachers in their instruction to get them prepared for performance assessments.
I think this was an opportunity for me to help students use critical thinking skills and applying the knowledge that I've taught them, but it's not, what I've really appreciated about it is that it's not something that's just at the end of the year. Oh, we're going to take a test at the end of the year. With the format that we have for project assessments, I can actually use that to teach them, especially if we use the inquiry design model within this, because I am giving them the sources. We are looking at primary sources, and then they are using those primary sources to apply the knowledge to a specific question, and being able to back up their answer with information that they have gleaned from those sources.
I already try to use a lot of primary and secondary sources when teaching Virginia studies, but our performance assessments has opportunities for these types of sources to be included in a very structured way to have students think critically about those sources, so that throughout the process of the instruction, as we work our way through the performance assessment, by the time they get to the end where they have to do more of the independent work and independent thinking, I've been holding their hand up to that point so they hopefully feel more confident in thinking critically on their own.
Students have to understand and know some content knowledge. I'm not trying to play down that importance, right? That's how our brain functions. That's how we build on what we already know, our prior knowledge. But when teachers are instructing students to do performance, they're taking the students into a deeper dive into that content for a deeper understanding. So it's not what we would just call surface learning.
And using the state common rubric to score our performance assessments, I found that it allowed me to have a very clear perspective in reading every student's piece of writing. So I was eliminating my bias in reading over everything that they had written, and it was a very almost standardized way of scoring all of their work. But at the same time, I was able to very clearly see where their weak areas were. What kids were able to give me a list of facts, what kids were able to give me a list of facts with value attached to them, and what kids could connect those facts and value together to compare and contrast.
And I actually had a student say to me, I really like project assessments. Why can't we do these in all classes? Because I really like the fact that I can tell you what I know rather than having to choose an answer on a test.
This year, we chose to invest our time and our energy in the development of inquiry-based assessments, partially because, of course, that is articulated in the C3 framework as social studies best practice, but also because the Virginia Department of Education has utilized that same framework and that structure to develop a pilot of performance assessments that are all inquiry-based for Virginia U.S. history in the 11th grade. So the teachers that are all featured in this video, as well as the assessments that they're talking about, were all collaboratively designed using that same framework and structure. And I have to say that that was a really great experience for us in social studies, because IDM, the inquiry design model that is, provided us with a structure that focused upon the instruction leading up to those summative exercises that are all kind of designed around a compelling question, but then it compelled us to then backwards design our instruction and think about how that leads up to and scaffolds the ultimate summative exercise. So while we were designing assessments, it's kind of refreshing to say that we were also spending as much, if not more time, designing instruction and curriculum to support those summative assessments and therefore make them that much more valid.
Whenever I see these activities taking place where all of a sudden the light goes on and it's not like, oh, now I remember the 17th president, right? It's about, now I understand why in my community some of these tensions exist and how they've been approached in the past and what problems they've created and how people have tried to solve those problems in my community especially, and how I can translate that to other communities and to other problems. It's amazing. You really see learning going on, and you see understanding, and you see application that you don't otherwise get to see in a classroom. And once you've been around that a little bit, and once you have staff that we have in Rockingham County, you just know, this is fundamentally changing education in a good way.